I hear the wet slap of the pipe before I hear my own scream. Rain floods my mouth as I fight for my mother's arm, my knuckles already split open from clawing at a stranger's jacket. I am screaming in 2 languages because neither one is fast enough to save us. Then headlights wash over the alley like judgment, and a car door opens, and a man steps out into weather that seems afraid to touch him. He says 4 words that will follow me for the rest of my life. They're mine now. That night, in a Hongdae alley soaked in rain and someone else's blood, I stopped being a girl running from Seoul's underworld and became something the underworld would never forget. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that like button and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. Southwest, find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready as we take you back to where it all began. Rain hammered the tin awning of the nori bang, drumming a rhythm that Ama Mensa would remember for the rest of her life. 2 men in cheap black suits dragged her mother across the wet pavement by a fistful of braided hair. Fua Mensa did not scream. She had stopped screaming an hour ago, when the debt collectors first broke down the door of their 1-room apartment above the fried chicken shop. Ama screamed enough for both of them, twisting and biting and kicking at shins, shouting curses in Chui that her mother had taught her only for emergencies, and broken Korean phrases she'd scraped together from 3 years of night school and grocery store arguments. One of the men raised a length of pipe over his head, and for a moment the whole alley narrowed down to that one silver arc against the rain. Then a black Maybach rolled to a stop at the mouth of the alley, and its headlights swallowed the scene whole. The door opened. A man stepped out in a coat so precisely tailored it looked engineered rather than sewn, and though the rain fell everywhere else in that alley, it seemed to hesitate before it reached him. The 2 enforcers went rigid the instant they saw the Black Lotus pinned to his lapel. The pipe lowered on its own, as if gravity itself had taken orders from the symbol. He did not raise his voice. He barely moved his mouth. They're mine now. The lead enforcer hesitated for exactly 1 second too long. Men who had been standing behind the tailored men a moment before were suddenly beside him, and then they were not beside him at all, they were simply there and then gone, folding into the dark corners of the alley with the enforcers between them. It was over before Ama understood it had started. Blood spread thin and pink across the wet concrete. The man in the coat turned and looked at her for the first time. She was soaked to the bone, chest heaving, fists still clenched like she intended to fight him too if it came to that. Something in his gaze caught on her and did not let go, though his face gave away nothing. Get in the car, he said, cold as the rain. Or stay here and die. Your choice. Ama did not trust him. She would tell herself that for weeks afterward, on nights when she couldn't sleep in the penthouse he installed them in, on the high floor of a glass tower with a view of a city that suddenly seemed to belong to him. She did not trust the way his men bowed their heads when he passed, did not trust the silence that followed him like a second shadow, did not trust the fact that her mother's hospital bill had vanished, replaced by a private doctor who visited twice a week and never asked who was paying him. She learned his name from the housekeeper who came each morning to stock the refrigerator, Kang Jae-hyun. 28 years old. Head of an organization the housekeeper wouldn't name, not even in a whisper, not even when Ama asked directly. You don't need his title, the housekeeper said, arranging vegetables with trembling hands. You need to be grateful and quiet. Ama was neither. The first time she saw him again, it was past midnight, and he came through the front door of the penthouse with his shirt collar open and a bruise blooming along his jaw. He didn't acknowledge her sitting at the kitchen island. He walked past her toward the bar cart like she was furniture, poured 2 fingers of something dark into a glass, and drank it standing at the window, looking down at the city he owned. You didn't have to save us, Ama said, breaking the silence because she couldn't stand it. You could have let them keep beating us in the rain and walked past. I could have, he agreed, not turning around. So why didn't you? He turned then, and his eyes moved over her in a way that made her want to fold her arms across her chest. Those men were operating on my territory without my permission. That's a problem I had to correct. You and your mother happened to be there. So we're not people to you. We're proof of a point. You're alive, he said. Isn't that enough for tonight? She hated him then, hated the flatness of his voice and the way he made cruelty sound like arithmetic. You're a monster, she said, and she meant it as a wound, something sharp enough to make him flinch. He didn't flinch. He set the glass down with a soft click against the marble counter. Yes. And you're still alive because of it. He left her standing in the kitchen with her own anger curdling in her stomach, and it would be 3 days before she saw him again, this time with blood on his cuffs that was not his own, walking through the door at 4 in the morning like a man returning from an ordinary shift at an ordinary job. Amma was awake, unable to sleep in a bed that cost more than her mother's yearly wages, and she watched him cross the living room toward the bathroom, one hand pressed to his side. "You're hurt," she said, standing before she decided to stand. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding on the floor, Jae-hyun, sit down." It was the first time she had used his name. He stopped mid-stride, as though the 2 syllables had physical weight, and something in his shoulders eased just slightly, the way a held breath finally leaves the body. He sat on the edge of the kitchen island without another word of protest, and Amma fetched the first aid kit from beneath the bathroom sink with hands that shook only a little. The wound was a shallow slice along his ribs, ugly but not deep, the kind of injury that spoke of a knife that had been meant to kill and had missed by inches. Amma cleaned it in silence, her fingers careful over skin marked with older scars, thin white lines that told stories she didn't ask him to tell. He watched her work with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement, the way her hair fell forward, the way her breath caught when he hissed at the antiseptic. "Why does someone try to kill you on a Tuesday night?" she asked, mostly to fill the silence. "Because I told him no," Jae-hyun said. "People who hear no from me sometimes decide to argue with a knife instead of words. And you let him get close enough to cut you. I let him think he had a chance. It makes them careless. Careless men are easier to finish." Amma taped the last strip of gauze into place and stepped back, arms crossed, studying him properly for the first time since the alley. Up close, without the coat, without the men flanking him, he looked younger than his reputation suggested, tired around the eyes in a way that no amount of money could fix. "Does it ever bother you," she asked, "hurting people for a living?" "It bothered me once," he said. "I don't allow it to bother me anymore. Bothered men make mistakes, and mistakes in my line of work are permanent." "That sounds lonely." For the first time, his composure cracked at the edges, not dramatically, just a small tightening around his mouth, a man unused to being seen so plainly. "It is," he admitted, quiet enough that she almost missed it. "I didn't expect you to notice." "I notice a lot of things," Amma said. "It's how my mother and I survived this long." He looked at her a moment longer than necessary, and then he stood, wincing slightly, and walked toward his room without another word. But at the doorway he paused. "Thank you," he said, not looking back, "for the bandage." It was such a small thing, and yet Amma lay awake long after, replaying the low rasp of his voice, furious with herself for the warmth that spread through her chest at 2 simple words. The weeks that followed built a bridge neither of them had intended to build. Amma began cooking in the ultramodern kitchen that had clearly never been used for anything more complicated than boiling water, filling the penthouse with the smell of jollof rice and fried plantain, and Jae-hyun began finding reasons to be home for dinner, though he never admitted that was what he was doing. Her mother, healing slowly under the private doctor's care, watched the 2 of them with the sharp, worried eyes of a woman who had seen enough of the world to know exactly what was growing between her daughter and the dangerous men who owned their lives now. "Amma," Fua said one evening, while Jae-hyun was out handling business neither of them asked about, "that man is not safe to love." "I don't love him," Amma said too quickly. Her mother only looked at her, the way mothers do when they already know the truth their child isn't ready to say aloud. The first real crack came on a night that started like every other. Jae-hyun cancelled a meeting because Amma had made a small dinner for the 3 of them, and the surprise on her face when he walked through the door on time, sleeves rolled up, tie already loosened, made something warm bloom behind her ribs that she refused to name. Later, after Fua had gone to bed, Amma found him on the rooftop terrace, staring out at the rain that always seemed to find Seoul at night, a cigarette unlit between his fingers because he never actually smoked, just held it like a habit he hadn't fully abandoned. "You didn't have to cancel your meeting," she said, joining him at the railing. "I wanted to eat dinner with people who don't want anything from me," he said. "It's rare. I forgot it could feel good." "We want plenty from you," Amma pointed out. "A roof. Safety. My mother's medical bills." "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant." The rain misted around them, and Jae-hyun turned to look at her fully, the city lights catching gold in his dark eyes. I taught my men how to read a room in 3 seconds, he said. I can tell when someone is lying, when they're planning to betray me, when they're afraid. I've built an empire on reading people accurately. And I cannot read you at all, Amma. You confuse me more than anyone I've faced in a decade. Is that a compliment or a complaint? I haven't decided. She laughed, a real laugh, the first one she'd let herself have since the night in the alley, and he watched her laugh like it was rarer than diamonds. When he reached out and tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, neither of them pulled away. The kiss that followed was slow, deliberate, the kind that asked a question and waited patiently for an answer. Amma gave it. On the rooftop of Black Lotus's headquarters, in the rain that had once nearly killed her, she chose the monster who had saved her, fully aware of what that choice might cost. He told her about his father that night, the men who built an empire on fear and left it to a son who never wanted a throne, only a family that had died with his mother years before Jae-hyun learned to walk into a room and make grown men flinch. He told her about the weight of a crown he couldn't set down, the ledger of debts and loyalties that ran his life more than his own desires ever could. Amma listened, and for the first time since the alley, she let herself believe that the men underneath the monster might be worth trusting. That trust nearly killed them both. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. Amma came home from the market with her arms full of vegetables and her mother nowhere in the penthouse. The private guard stationed outside had vanished. On the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl, sat a phone that wasn't hers. She pressed play on the single video file waiting there, and her knees nearly gave out. Her mother knelt on a bare concrete floor, a gun pressed to her temple, terror carved into every line of her face. A voice off camera, calm and unhurried, listed a demand, the complete shipping routes and safe house locations of Black Lotus. 48 hours, or Fu Mensa would die on camera, and the footage would be sent to every rival organization in Seoul as a warning about what happened to Kang Jae-hyun's weaknesses. Amma did not sleep that night. She sat with the phone clutched in both hands, watching the video over and over until her mother's terrified face was burned behind her eyelids. She tried 3 times to tell Jae-hyun. Each time she found him, words rising in her throat, his phone would ring with news of another crisis, another crack forming somewhere in his empire, his jaw tightening with a focus that shut the rest of the world out entirely, and the words died in her mouth. On the 3rd attempt, he turned to her mid-stride, his expression already hardening into something businesslike and distant. Not now, Amma. We have a traitor somewhere inside the organization. I need to find them before they cost me more than money. The word traitor landed like a slap. Amma stood frozen in the hallway as he walked away, and the choice that had seemed impossible an hour before suddenly felt like the only door left open to her. She leaked the information herself, sending it through the burner phone exactly as instructed, her hand shaking so badly she had to retype the message twice. Within hours, the consequences arrived like a tidal wave. 3 of Black Lotus's largest shipments were seized in a single night. A safe house in Incheon burned to the ground with 2 men inside. A warehouse deal worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes collapsed before it ever closed. Jae-hyun's empire, built on precision and silence, bled out in public for the first time in years, and every enemy watching sensed blood in the water. Fua was released unharmed, dropped at a random subway station with nothing but the clothes on her back, and Amma sobbed with relief when she found her mother safe, wrapping her in her arms so tightly Fua could barely breathe. But relief lasted only until Jae-hyun's black Maybach pulled up outside their building an hour later, and 4 of his men escorted Amma into the car without a word of explanation. He already knew. Amma sat across from him in the underground room beneath Black Lotus headquarters, the same room where his father had once broken traitors into confessions, the concrete walls stained with history she didn't want to imagine. Jae-hyun stood in front of her, his face a mask of controlled fury, more terrifying in its stillness than any shouting could have been. He crouched to her level, close enough that she could see the exhaustion behind his rage, and he asked one question in a voice gone almost gentle, which frightened her more than screaming would have. Why? The dam broke. Amma told him everything, the video, the gun against her mother's temple, the 48-hour countdown, the 3 failed attempts to warn him while he was consumed by his own crisis. She told him she chose her mother's life over his empire and would make the same choice again without hesitation, no matter what it cost her. I would have burned the entire city down for her, Amma said, tears streaking her face. You once said I was still alive because of what you are willing to do. I am exactly the same. I am not sorry for saving her. I am only sorry it hurt you. Silence stretched between them, thick and unbearable. Jae-hyun stood, his shadow falling across her, and for one terrible moment Amma believed she was about to die in the same room where so many traitors before her had died. Instead, he reached down and unlocked the chains from her wrists himself, his fingers steady despite the tremor she could see in his jaw. He walked out without another word, and Amma sat alone in that concrete room, unsure whether she had just survived or merely been given a longer sentence. She learned the full truth 3 days later, and it broke something open in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Jae-hyun had known about the kidnapping within the first hour. His most trusted lieutenant tracked Fua's movements as standard protocol the moment she'd entered the penthouse months before, a precaution Amma had never been told about. He had watched the ransom demand unfold in real time and made a calculated, ruthless decision. He allowed the leak to happen, allowed his own empire to bleed, because the intelligence Amma was forced to hand over gave his men a direct map into rival territory they had been trying to breach for years. He let her fear and love for her mother become a weapon aimed exactly where he needed it aimed. When Amma confronted him about it, finding him alone in his office at 2 in the morning, staring at blueprints of a warehouse she recognized from the video, her voice shook with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. "You used me," she said. "You let my mother sit with a gun to her head because it was useful to you." "I would never have let her die," Jae-hyun said, not looking up from the blueprints. "My men were tracking her location the entire time. If the exchange had gone wrong, I would have extracted her within the hour." "That's not the point, Jae-hyun. You let me believe I had no choice but to betray you. You let me carry that guilt alone for days." Finally he looked up, and there was no apology in his eyes, only a hard, unflinching honesty that somehow made it worse. "I am the head of an organization that survives on information and precision. I could not risk showing my hand before I understood exactly who had orchestrated this against me. Your pain was a cost I calculated and accepted. I am telling you the truth because you deserve it, not because it will make you forgive me. And if it doesn't, then I will have lost the one thing in this life I actually wanted to keep," he said, "and I will have to live with that." The raid came 2 nights later, executed with a precision that made the earlier chaos look like a rehearsal. Jae-hyun moved on Choi Min-kyu's entire operation in a single coordinated strike, extracting critical assets, dismantling 3 of his rivals' strongholds, and sending a message that echoed through every underworld network in the city. Amma watched the aftermath unfold from the penthouse window, her phone buzzing with updates from a lieutenant assigned to keep her informed, her heart caught somewhere between horror and a fierce, unwilling pride. When Jae-hyun returned near dawn, his coat torn at the shoulder, his knuckles split, he found Amma waiting exactly where he'd found her that first bloody night, in the kitchen, standing her ground. "It's done," he said. "Choi's network is finished. Your mother is safe. No one will threaten her again." "At what cost?" "At the cost you already know," he said. "Men died tonight because of the game we're both playing. I won't pretend otherwise to make this easier for either of us." Amma crossed the space between them, close enough to see the bruises darkening along his cheekbone, close enough to smell rain and copper still clinging to his coat. "You could have told me the truth from the beginning. About the tracker. About the plan. You let me suffer for information you already had." "I know," he said, and for the first time since she'd met him, his voice cracked entirely open, raw and unguarded. "I have spent my whole life believing that control was the only thing keeping the people I love alive. My mother died because my father trusted the wrong person with information that mattered. I built every wall in my life so that mistake would never repeat itself. I used you the way I use everyone because it is the only method I have ever trusted. And I am telling you now, standing here, that it was wrong. You deserved better from me." "Then give me a choice you actually mean," Amma said, her voice trembling but steady. "Not one designed to protect your empire. A real one." Jae-hyun studied her for a long moment, and then he offered it, laying 2 futures on the table between them like a man placing his own heart on a scale. "You can leave with your mother tonight," he said. "I will erase every record connecting either of you to me. New names, new city, more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. No one from this world will ever find you again. You will be free of me completely." "And the other choice?" "Stay," he said, the word barely above a whisper, stripped of every ounce of the cold command she'd first heard in that alley. "Stay, and become my equal in every sense. Not my prisoner, not someone I protect from a distance, but someone who stands beside me knowing exactly what that means, knowing this world will never stop trying to use you against me, knowing I cannot promise you an easy life, only an honest one from this point forward. Amma thought of the alley, the rain, the pipe raised over her mother's head, and the men who had stepped out of the dark and claimed them both with 4 cold words. She thought of every lie and every truth that had followed, every wound she had cleaned and every wound he had caused. She thought of the warmth in her chest she had tried and failed to name for months. I'm staying, she said. Not because you saved me. Not out of guilt for what I cost you. I'm staying because somewhere between that alley and tonight, I stopped seeing the monster everyone warned me about and started seeing you. All of you. And I choose that, even knowing what it means. The blood oath ceremony took place 3 weeks later, in a private room lit by candlelight, blending rituals from 2 worlds that had never been meant to touch. A Ghanaian elder Fu trusted spoke words of binding over a shared bowl, and a Black Lotus tradition older than Jae-hyun's father sealed the promise in blood drawn from each of their palms, pressed together until the 2 lines became one. Fu watched from the corner of the room, tears in her eyes, no longer certain whether she was witnessing a blessing or a warning, only certain that her daughter had chosen this path with open eyes. It was Choi Min-kyu, dying slowly from a wound sustained during the raid, smuggled a message out through a corrupted guard that reached Jae-hyun's desk the very night of the ceremony. The message was short, and it unraveled everything Amma believed she understood about the night in the alley. The kidnapping had never been Choi's idea alone. Someone inside Black Lotus, someone who sat close enough to Jae-hyun to know his schedule, his weaknesses, the precise night Fu would be alone and vulnerable, had fed Choi every detail needed to execute the plan. The goal was never simply to steal shipping routes. The goal was to make the coldest man in Seoul fall in love, to soften him just enough that his guard would finally, fatally, drop. Jae-hyun read the message twice, his face unreadable in the candlelight, and then he looked up at the small circle of people he trusted most in the world, gathered in that room to witness his bond with Amma. Somewhere among them, or close enough to have arranged it, sat the person who had engineered every moment of the last 6 months. The traitor was still sitting at his right hand. And that, my dark-hearted friends, is exactly where we leave things tonight, on the edge of a blood oath and a betrayal neither of them saw coming. If this story pulled you in the way I hope it did, do not go anywhere without hitting that subscribe button, tapping like, and dropping a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. Tell me who you think the traitor is sitting at Jae-hyun's right hand. I promise you, the answer will break your heart in the next part of this story. Share this with someone who loves a dangerous love story as much as you do, and I will see you very soon, right back here, for the next chapter of Blood Lotus.